They say blood is thicker than water, but what they don't tell you is that blood can also be a blindfold. I was sitting in my childhood living room, the place that used to feel like my ultimate sanctuary, when my mother looked me dead in the eyes and told me the person I'd loved for 7 years, the person I was planning my entire future with, was a master manipulator. My heart didn't just drop. It felt like it had been ripped out and shown to me, cold and clinical. I wasn't just losing my family in that moment. I was being told that I didn't even know my own life, that my memories were lies. How do you choose between the people who gave you life and the person who actually makes that life worth living? And more importantly, what do you do when the people you trust most start rewriting your reality right in front of your eyes, trying to make you believe you're a victim of the one person who has ever truly loved you? To understand how I got to that couch, feeling like the world was tilting on its axis, you have to understand the last 7 years. I'm 26 now, and my girlfriend is 25. We met when we were basically kids, just 19 and 18, stumbling into a love that felt far too big for our ages. But from the very start, it wasn't just us. It was us against everything else. You see, our families weren't exactly waiting with open arms and rainbow flags. Her parents were deeply, traditionally religious, and for them, our relationship wasn't just a choice. It was a sin that threatened their very worldview. My parents? Well, they were a different brand of difficult. They leaned into the good old-fashioned variety of homophobia, seasoned with a layer of racism that they tried to hide behind concern. For the first 3 or 4 years, it was a literal battlefield. There were holidays spent apart, tearful phone calls in parking lots, and the constant, crushing weight of feeling like we were disappointing the people who raised us just by existing. We were constantly told we were going through a phase, or that we were being led astray. But we held on. We held on so tight that eventually, the storm seemed to run out of rain. Her parents moved from outright rejection to a sort of quiet, uneasy acceptance. They started letting us see each other without the fire and brimstone. My parents? They were more like a weather vane. Some days they were fine, almost pleasant. Other days, the wind would shift, their moods would sour, and suddenly we were back in the line of fire. I learned to walk on eggshells, checking the temperature of the room before I dared to mention her name. But despite the background noise of our families, our relationship was the one thing that was silent, steady, and beautiful. We grew up together. We went from college students sharing cheap takeout to adults with real careers. I finally landed my big girl job, and she just got an incredible offer for a position starting this fall. For the first time in our lives, the horizon looked clear. No more sneaking around, no more living out of overnight bags, no more saying goodbye at the end of the night and driving back to houses that didn't feel like homes. We started doing what we've dreamed of since we were 19. We started looking for a place of our own. I can't even describe the high of those first few weeks of searching. We were touring apartments, scrolling through listings until our eyes blurred, talking about where the couch would go and what color we should paint the bedroom. It felt like we were finally crossing the finish line of a marathon that had lasted 7 years. We debated whether or not to even tell our parents. Part of me wanted to just disappear, to sign a lease and send them a postcard once we were settled. But there's that little voice in your head, isn't there? The one that hopes, maybe this time they'll be happy for you. We decided to be adults. We decided to tell them our plans, hoping that our stability and our success would finally prove to them that this wasn't a mistake. I decided to tell my mother first. We were in the kitchen, and I tried to keep my voice casual, like I wasn't dropping a bomb. I told her we were moving in together. I told her how excited I was, how much sense it made for our careers and our finances. I expected a sigh, maybe a cold remark about living in sin, or even just a stony silence. I was prepared for that. I was not prepared for what actually happened. The moment the words left my mouth, my mother's face transformed. It wasn't anger. It was this performative, tragic mask of pity. She didn't yell. Instead, She started rambling, her voice hitting this high, frantic note. She started listing reasons, excuses really, as to why I shouldn't leave. The commute would be too long. The economy was too unstable. I was too young to commit to a lease like that. When she saw those logic-based arguments weren't sticking, she pivoted. And she pivoted hard. She looked at me, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, and said, "I'm just worried about you, honey. She's so controlling. She's condescending to you and you don't even see it." I felt like I'd been slapped. Controlling? My girlfriend? This is the woman who asks me what I want for dinner 3 times because she wants to make sure I'm happy. This is the woman who encouraged me to take the job that paid more, even though it meant we'd have less time together. I looked at my mother, my heart racing, and I asked her for one example. Just one. Give me a single instance where she was condescending to me. Give me a moment where she controlled me. My mother blinked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She couldn't do it. She didn't have a single story, a single sentence, or a single memory to back it up. Finally, she just huffed and said, "I'll have to get back to you on that. But I know what I see." I left that room feeling sick, but I thought, okay, maybe she's just having a moment. Maybe she's just scared of losing me to a new home. So I went to my father later that day, hoping for a voice of reason. My dad and I have always had a different dynamic, and I thought surely he'd see how ridiculous this was. I brought it up to him, telling him what Mom had said. He sat there, looking grave, and nodded. "Well," he said, "I don't think she's condescending, but your mother is right. She is controlling." I felt the air leave my lungs again. "Dad, how? How is she controlling?" He leaned forward, as if he was about to reveal a deep, dark secret. "Think about it," he said. "Whenever she surprises you with something, or whenever she changes plans last minute to do something nice, that's control. She does those things so she can be the hero. She wants to control your emotions. She wants to be the one in charge of how you feel." I sat there in stunned silence. He was taking the most beautiful parts of our relationship, the spontaneity, the kindness, the way she goes out of her way to make me smile, and he was twisting them into something sinister. He was telling me that my happiness was actually a symptom of abuse. It was the ultimate gaslight. They were trying to convince me that the person who loves me most in this world was actually my silent captor. I went to my room and locked the door, my mind spinning. I started looking back at our 7 years. I searched every memory, every argument, every quiet moment. I looked for the control they were talking about. I looked for the condescension. All I found was a woman who has been my rock through every storm my parents put us through. She's never told me what to wear. She's never told me who I can talk to. She's never once made me feel small. In fact, she's the only person who makes me feel like I'm enough exactly as I am. The disconnect was so violent that I started to feel like I was losing my mind. Was I that blind? Is it possible to be in an unhealthy relationship for 7 years and have absolutely no idea? I reached out to my best friend, someone who has seen us since day one. I told her everything. I told her what my parents said, and I asked her, point blank, am I in an unhealthy relationship? Am I missing the signs? My friend didn't even hesitate. She was furious. She told me that my girlfriend wouldn't hurt a fly, and that she's the most selfless person our friend group knows. She confirmed everything I felt in my gut, but the seed of doubt my parents planted was already starting to grow. They're my parents. They're supposed to want the best for me. Why would they lie about something this serious? And if they aren't lying, if they truly believe this, then I'm faced with a choice I never wanted to make. If I move out, if I choose my life with her, I'm not just moving into an apartment. I'm walking away from a family that thinks they're saving me from a monster. The word hero kept echoing in my mind like a warped record. My father had used it like a slur. In his eyes, her kindness wasn't a gift, it was a tactic. Her thoughtfulness wasn't love, it It was a performance designed to keep me indebted to her. I sat on my bed that night, the door locked, staring at a framed photo of us from 2 summers ago. We were at a music festival, covered in dust and sweat, grinning like idiots. I remembered that day perfectly. It had been her idea to go. She'd surprised me with the tickets because she knew how much I loved the headlining band. According to my father, that wasn't a sweet gesture. That was her controlling my emotions. That was her being the hero. How do you even fight against logic like that? It's a closed loop. If she's mean to me, she's abusive. If she's nice to me, she's manipulative. There was no way for her to win in their narrative. And the realization started to sink in. This wasn't about her at all. This was about power. For 7 years, my parents had held the reins. They dictated when I could see her, how I should feel about her, and what our future should look like. Now that I was 26, with a career and a plan to leave, they were losing that grip. And instead of letting go gracefully, they were trying to poison the well. They were trying to make me afraid of the very person who offered me freedom. The next few days at home were suffocating. It's amazing how quickly a home can turn into a cage once the masks come off. My mother started doing this thing where she'd walk into a room, look at me with these watery, tragic eyes, and then sigh deeply before walking out without saying a word. It was a silent, "Poor you." Every time I picked up my phone to text my girlfriend, I felt her gaze on me, judging every keystroke. When I did speak to my girlfriend, I found myself hesitating. I'd go to tell her about a funny thing that happened at work, and then I'd stop. I'd wonder, is this a normal conversation, or am I being conditioned? That's the poison of gaslighting. It doesn't just make you doubt the other person. It makes you doubt your own sanity. I finally had to tell her. We met up at a park, a neutral territory where I didn't feel like the walls had ears. I sat her down on a bench and tried to explain what my parents had said. Seeing the look on her face was one of the hardest things I've ever had to endure. She didn't get angry. She didn't get defensive or start listing all the nice things she'd done for me. She just looked broken. Her shoulders slumped and her eyes filled with tears that she refused to let fall. "I've spent 7 years trying to show them I love you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I've gone to every awkward dinner. I've smiled through the comments. I've tried to be the perfect partner so they'd see you're safe with me. And they think I'm a monster?" I grabbed her hand, feeling the familiar warmth of it, and for a moment, the fog cleared. This wasn't a manipulator sitting in front of me. This was a woman who had been through the trenches with me, who had been my biggest cheerleader when I was struggling through my degree, and who had never once asked for anything in return but my heart. I told her I didn't believe them. I told her I knew who she was. But even as I said it, the fear was there. The fear that by choosing her, I was effectively orphaning myself. We had an apartment tour scheduled for that evening. It was a beautiful 2-bedroom in a quiet part of the city with huge windows and an old-fashioned fireplace. Under any other circumstances, we would have been giddy. We would have been imagining where our books would go and what kind of rug would look best on the hardwood floors. But as we walked through the rooms, the silence between us was heavy. The landlord was chatting away about the neighborhood, and all I could think about was my mother's voice saying, "She's controlling." I caught myself watching her. When she pointed out the light in the kitchen, I wondered if she was directing my attention. When she asked if I liked the layout, I wondered if she was testing my compliance. I hated myself for it. I felt like a traitor to the person who loved me most. We left the tour and sat in her car for a long time, neither of us moving to start the engine. "Do you want to keep looking?" she asked softly. She didn't look at me, she just stared out the windshield. "Because if you're scared, or if you think they're right, I won't force you into this. I would never want you to move in with me if you feel like you're being trapped." That was the moment. That was the controlling woman giving you a complete out. She was literally offering to put her own dreams on hold to make sure I felt safe. It was the exact opposite of what my father had described. I realized then that my parents weren't concerned. They were projecting. They were the ones who were controlling. They were the ones who were condescending. They were the ones who were trying to manage my emotions by planting seeds of doubt and fear. I took a deep breath and told her, "No, I want this. I want us. We're moving." But the hero comment hadn't just affected me. It had given my parents a new script to follow. When I got home that night, my mother was waiting in the kitchen. She had a notepad on the table. She looked up at me, her expression cold and clinical. "I thought of an example," she said. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Okay, Mom, let's hear it." She looked down at her notes. "Last Thanksgiving, you wanted to wear that blue dress, the one I bought you, but she told you that you looked stunning in the black slacks and the emerald top. You changed your outfit because she praised you. That's manipulation, honey. She used positive reinforcement to change your behavior to suit her aesthetic. She took away your choice by making you feel like her opinion was the only one that mattered." I stared at her, genuinely worried for her mental state. "Mom, I asked her which one I should wear because I couldn't decide. She gave me a compliment. That's what partners do." "No," my mother snapped, her voice finally losing its faux pity. "That's what masters do to their pets. They reward the behavior they want to see. And you're so desperate for her approval that you don't even see the leash around your neck." The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. Here was my mother, who had spent my entire life criticizing my weight, my hair, my career choices, and my sexuality, lecturing me on leashes. She was the one who had spent years using guilt as a weapon, who had used the silent treatment like a scalpel to get what she wanted. And now, she was trying to convince me that a simple compliment from my girlfriend was an act of psychological warfare. I didn't argue. I realized in that moment that you cannot reason someone out of a position they didn't reason themselves into. This wasn't a debate about facts. It was a war for my soul. I simply turned around and went to my room. But the escalation had begun. Over the next week, the switch up my parents were famous for became more extreme. One morning, my dad would be making pancakes, asking me about my new job, acting like the perfect, supportive father. He'd talk about how proud he was of my independence. Then, by dinner, the atmosphere would turn radioactive. They'd sit in silence, refusing to pass the salt, radiating a palpable sense of betrayal. It was a psychological roller coaster designed to keep me off balance. They wanted me to crave the good days so much that I'd do anything to keep them, including dumping my girlfriend. Then came the day we actually signed the lease. We did it in a coffee shop, our hands shaking as we initialed the pages. It should have been the happiest day of my life. Instead, I felt like I was signing a declaration of war. I knew that once I told them the lease was signed, there would be no going back. The maybe would become a reality, and I had no idea how far they would go to stop it. When I walked through my front door that evening, I found my parents sitting on the couch together. They weren't watching TV, they weren't reading, they were just sitting there, waiting for me. The air in the room felt heavy, like the static before a lightning strike. "We need to talk," my father said, his voice low and dangerous. "We've been doing some thinking, and we've decided that if you move out with her, we won't be attending your graduation ceremony next month. And we won't be helping you with your car insurance anymore. If you want to be independent with a woman who controls you, then you can be fully independent. We won't fund your destruction." They were pulling the plug. They were using every financial and emotional leverage point they had left. I stood there, looking at these two people who had raised me, and for the first time, I didn't see my parents. I saw two strangers who were willing to sabotage my future just to maintain their sense of control. The silence that followed my father's ultimatum was the loudest thing I've ever heard. It wasn't just the words, it was the cold, calculated way he said them. He wasn't angry. He was playing a hand in a high-stakes poker game, and he thought he held all the cards. My graduation, my car insurance, my safety net. He was systematically dismantling my life, piece by piece, right there in the living room, waiting for me to break. He expected me to cry, to beg, to tell him I'd call it all off just to keep the peace. But something inside me snapped. For years, I had been the good daughter. I had been the one to bridge the gaps, to apologize for things I didn't do, and to filter my life so it wouldn't offend their sensibilities. I had lived in a state of perpetual auditioning, trying to prove that I was worthy of their love despite who I loved. And in that moment, looking at my father's smug expression and my mother's tragic face, I realized that the price of their love was my soul. "Okay," I said. My voice was surprisingly steady. My father blinked. "Okay? You realize what we're saying, right? We won't be there. We won't support this." "I heard you, Dad," I replied, standing my ground. "If your love for me is conditional on me living the life you want instead of the one I've built, then I guess we don't have much to talk about. I'll figure out the insurance. And as for graduation, I'll miss you there, but I'll be surrounded by people who are actually proud of me." I turned and walked toward the stairs, my legs feeling like lead. I could hear my mother start to wail behind me, that high-pitched, performative sob she used whenever she wasn't getting her way. "You're breaking our hearts. She's doing this to you. She's pulling you away from us." I locked my bedroom door and sank onto the floor, my back against the wood. I was shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. I called my girlfriend. When she picked up, I couldn't even get the words out at first. I just sat there, breathing into the receiver, until she started talking me down, her voice a low, steady anchor in the middle of my storm. "Breathe, baby, just breathe. I've got you," she said. I told her everything. I told her about the insurance, the graduation, the accusations of her being a master. I expected her to be angry. I expected her to tell me my parents were crazy. Instead, she was quiet for a long time. "I am so sorry," she finally whispered. "I feel like I'm the reason you're losing everything." And there it was. That was the most heartbreaking part of all. My parents were so convinced she was this manipulative villain, but here she was, taking the blame for their cruelty. She was willing to carry the weight of their homophobia and their control issues on her own shoulders, just because she loved me. "You're not the reason," I told her, my voice cracking. "They are the reason. They're choosing to do this. You're just the person who gave me a reason to finally stand up to them." The next few weeks were a blur of logistical warfare. Since my parents were cutting off my insurance, I had to spend hours on the phone figuring out a new policy, navigating the bureaucracy of being a real adult faster than I had planned. Every time I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, my mother would walk by and make a comment. "Must be nice to have so much money to throw away just to live with a stranger," she'd say. Or, "I hope your hero is going to pay for your car if you get into a wreck." It was constant. It was a drip feed of poison. They started treating me like a guest they couldn't wait to get rid of. They stopped making enough food for dinner. They stopped asking how my day was. One night, I came home to find a stack of boxes outside my door. My dad hadn't even waited for me to start packing. He'd gone into the garage and pulled out old shipping containers, leaving them there as a silent command to get out. I started packing that night. It's a strange thing, packing up your childhood bedroom under the shadow of a ticking clock. Every item I touched held a memory. A trophy from middle school, a sweater I wore on our first date, a photo of me and my parents from a vacation 10 years ago, back when things were simple. I looked at that photo and tried to find the people I used to know. I realized then that my parents' homophobia wasn't just about religion or tradition. It was about ownership. They didn't see me as a person with my own agency. They saw me as an extension of themselves. As long as I was under their roof and following their rules, I was theirs. But by choosing a woman they couldn't control or understand, I was reclaiming my own life. And to them, that was an act of war. The contrast between my home life and my life with my girlfriend became a literal black and white movie. At home, everything was gray, tense, and silent. But when I'd go to her place, or we'd meet to go furniture shopping, it was like stepping into Technicolor. We found a small, mid-century modern dining table at a thrift store, and we spent 4 hours sanding it down and restaining it. We were covered in sawdust, laughing, listening to music, and for those 4 hours, I forgot that my mother thought I was being groomed into a victim. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, looking up from the table, a smudge of stain on her cheek. "Just how much I love this table," I lied. I couldn't tell her that I was thinking about how my father would call this moment performative labor. I couldn't tell her that every time she was sweet to me, a tiny, poisoned part of my brain, the part my parents built, wondered if there was an ulterior motive. I hated them for that. I hated them for making me look at the purest thing in my life through a distorted lens. As moving day approached, the tension at home reached a fever pitch. My parents shifted from the silent treatment to a desperate last-minute offensive. One evening, my mother sat me down and pulled out a stack of printouts. They were articles from obscure blogs and forums about toxic relationships, love bombing, and codependency. "I just want you to read these," she said, her voice trembling with what looked like genuine fear. "Look at the signs, honey. She's isolated you from us. She's made you think we're the enemy. That's the first step of a cult leader. They isolate the victim so they have no one else to turn to." I looked at the papers, then looked at her. "Mom, you're the one isolating me. You're the one who told me you wouldn't come to my graduation. You're the one who cut off my insurance. You're creating the isolation and then blaming her for it." She looked at me like I had slapped her. "We're doing that to protect ourselves. We can't be part of your downfall." The circular logic was dizzying. They were hurting me to save me from being hurt. They were abandoning me to protect me from being abandoned. I realized there was no winning. There was no magical sentence I could say that would make the scales fall from their eyes. They had committed to a story where I was the victim and my girlfriend was the villain, and they would set the whole world on fire before they admitted they were wrong. The night before the move, I barely slept. I had everything packed. The boxes were stacked by the door, and my room felt hollow. I walked through the house one last time in the middle of the night, touching the walls, looking at the kitchen where I learned to cook, the backyard where I used to play. I felt a profound sense of grief. It felt like I was attending the funeral of my family while they were still sleeping in the next room. I knew that when I walked out that door tomorrow, things would never be the same. I knew that the peace we had maintained for the last few years was gone for good. I was choosing a side. And as I looked out the window at the quiet street, I felt a terrifying, exhilarating realization. I was finally, for the first time in 26 years, actually free. The morning of the move felt like a funeral. I woke up at 5 a.m., the sun barely creeping over the horizon, and the house was dead silent. Usually, I'd hear the hum of the coffee maker or the muffled sound of the morning news, but today, there was nothing. It was as if my parents had already decided I was gone. I sat on the edge of my bed, looking at the tower of boxes that held my entire life, and for a split second, I felt that familiar, paralyzing urge to apologize. I wanted to run into their room, tell them I was sorry, and promise never to leave if they just loved me the way they used to. But then I remembered the articles on cult leaders my mother had shoved in my face. I remembered my father's face when he told me he wouldn't watch me graduate. That wasn't love. That was a ransom note. At 8 a.m., a bright yellow moving truck pulled into the driveway. My girlfriend hopped out, followed by 3 of our closest friends. They were loud, they were wearing old t-shirts and leggings, and they were carrying Starbucks carriers like they were going into battle. The moment I saw her face, bright, hopeful, and genuinely happy for us, the heavy knot in my chest loosened just a little. "You ready, babe?" she asked, pulling me into a quick hug. She didn't ask if I was okay. She knew I wasn't. She just held me for a second longer than usual, a silent reminder that she was the shore I was swimming toward. We started hauling boxes. My friends were incredible, making jokes about my excessive collection of coffee mugs and trying to figure out how to navigate my old dresser down the narrow stairs. It should have been a celebration, but every time we passed through the living room, there they were. My parents had taken up positions on the sofa. They weren't helping. They weren't even acknowledging our presence. My dad was staring at a book he wasn't reading, and my mother was knitting, her needles clicking with a rhythmic, aggressive precision. It was surreal. My friends, who are normally the loudest people I know, went quiet every time they entered the house. The air was so thick with resentment, you could practically see it. At one point, my girlfriend picked up a box labeled kitchen, and as she walked past my mother, she stopped. She's a better person than I am. She wanted to try one last time. "Mrs. Ney," she said softly, "I know this is a big change, but I want you to know that I'm going to take such good care of her. We'd love for you to come over and see the place once we're settled." My mother didn't even look up from her knitting. "I'm sure you'll take care of her exactly how you want to," she said, her voice dripping with that poisoned sweetness. "Just like you've taken care of her mind." My girlfriend flinched like she'd been struck. She didn't say another word. She just carried the box out to the truck. I saw her hand trembling as she set it down. That was the moment my sadness turned into a cold, hard anger. They weren't just hurting me anymore. They were actively trying to break the spirit of someone who had done nothing but love me. The last thing to go was my desk chair. I walked back into the house to grab it, and my father finally spoke. He didn't stand up. He didn't offer a hug. "Don't come crying to us when she gets bored of playing house and starts showing you who she really is," he said, his voice flat. "We'll be here, but don't expect the door to be unlocked." "I won't be coming back, Dad," I said. And for the first time in my life, I meant it. Driving away in the moving truck, watching my childhood home shrink in the rearview mirror, I expected to feel a massive sense of relief. Instead, I felt like I was grieving. I was 26 years old, and I was essentially an orphan by choice. I looked over at my girlfriend in the driver's seat. She reached over and squeezed my hand, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "We're going home," she said. The first few nights in the new apartment were strange. You see it in movies. The couple eating pizza on the floor of their empty living room, laughing and drinking wine from plastic cups. And we did that. We laughed, and we planned, and we celebrated. But when the lights went out, and the city noise hummed outside our window, I found myself lying awake, listening to her breathe. And that's when the poison would start to seep in. I'd think about what my father said. She wants to be the hero. I'd think about my mother's examples. I'd find myself analyzing every little interaction. When she brought me coffee in bed, was she being sweet, or was she trying to make me dependent on her? When she suggested we go for a walk, was she being active, or was she controlling my schedule? It was exhausting. I was living in my dream apartment with my dream woman, and I was carrying my parents around in my head like ghosts. I felt like a spy in my own life, looking for evidence of a crime that hadn't been committed. I remember one Saturday morning, about 2 weeks in, I was trying to hang a gallery wall of photos, mostly of us, our friends, and my siblings. I couldn't get the alignment right, and I was getting frustrated. My girlfriend came into the room, saw me struggling, and said, "Hey, do you want me to hold the level while you mark the spots? It might be easier with 2 people." I snapped. "I can do it myself. I don't need you to fix everything for me." The room went dead silent. She just stood there, holding a level, looking at me with total confusion. I realized in that second that I wasn't yelling at her. I was yelling at the version of her my parents had created. I was so afraid of being controlled that I was pushing away the person who was actually trying to partner with me. I dropped the hammer and burst into tears. I ended up on the floor, sobbing into my hands, and she was right there. She didn't get mad. She didn't tell me I was being dramatic. She just sat on the floor with me and let me cry until I was hollowed out. "They're still in your head, aren't they?" she whispered. "I hate them for it," I choked out. "I hate that I'm looking for reasons to be afraid of you." "It's okay," she said, pulling me into her lap. "It's going to take time to unlearn 26 years of their voices. But I'm not going anywhere. I'll be the hero, the villain, the roommate, or whatever else they want to call me, as long as I get to be your person." That was the turning point. I realized that the only way to beat their narrative was to stop playing their game. I had to stop looking for signs and start looking at the reality of my life. The reality was that I was happier, more successful, and more at peace than I had ever been in that house. Work became my sanctuary. My big girl job was demanding, but it was a place where I was judged on my merits, not my choice of partner. I threw myself into it, and for 8 hours a day, I could forget the war at home. But then graduation day started to loom on the calendar like a dark cloud. Graduation was supposed to be the culmination of everything. I was the first one in my family to get a degree in this field. I had worked 3 jobs to put myself through school, and as the day got closer, the invitation sat on the kitchen counter, mocking me. I hadn't sent one to my parents. I knew they wouldn't come. But a part of me, that little girl who still wanted her dad to be proud of her, kept hoping they'd call. I kept hoping they'd say they'd changed their minds, that they were sorry, that they'd be there in the front row. They didn't. Instead, I got a text from my brother 3 days before the ceremony. He'd always been the neutral one, the one who tried to stay out of the line of fire. Hey, he wrote, Mom and Dad are planning a family dinner the night of your graduation. They didn't invite you. They told us they're doing it to celebrate the family that's still together. It's pretty messed up, honestly. I'm still coming to your ceremony, though. Don't tell them. I sat at my desk at work and stared at that message until the words blurred. A family dinner to celebrate the family that's still together? They were literally celebrating my exclusion. They were turning my greatest achievement into a day of mourning for the daughter they'd decided was dead to them. I felt a coldness settle into my bones. The last lingering thread of hope I had for a reconciliation snapped. They weren't just concerned parents who were misguided. They were cruel. They were using their love as a weapon, and when I refused to be hurt by it anymore, they decided to try and erase me. But they forgot one thing. You can't erase someone who is finally learning how to draw their own boundaries. The text from my brother was the final nail in the coffin. A family dinner to celebrate the family that's still together. It was so theatrical, so perfectly designed to twist the knife, that I almost had to laugh. My parents weren't just mourning my departure. They were throwing a party for my replacement. They were essentially telling the world, and my siblings, that I was a cancerous limb they had successfully amputated. For 24 hours, I went numb. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just moved through my apartment like a ghost. My girlfriend tried to reach me, but I was in a place she couldn't follow. I was staring into the void of what my life used to be, and all I saw was a lie. Every birthday, every Christmas, every I love you from my parents now felt like it had been conditional. It was, I love you as long as you're who I want you to be. The moment I stepped outside that box, the love didn't just fade. It turned into a weapon. Graduation morning arrived with a cruel, mocking brightness. The sun was streaming through our new bedroom windows, highlighting the few boxes we still hadn't unpacked. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my cap and gown draped over a chair. This was it. The day I'd worked 4 years for. The day that was supposed to be a victory lap. My girlfriend walked in with a tray, 2 coffees, and a plate of toast. She didn't say happy graduation. She knew better. She just set the tray down and sat on the floor at my feet, resting her head on my knees. I know, she whispered. I know it hurts. They're really not coming, I said, the reality finally hitting me. They're actually sitting in that house right now, probably prepping for their loyal family dinner, while I'm putting on this gown. She looked up at me, her eyes fierce. Then let them. Let them sit in that house with their bitterness and their rules. But look around this room, babe. Look at what you've built. You got that degree while they were whispering in your ear that you were failing. You got that job while they were trying to convince you that you were a victim. You are the strongest person I have ever known. And if they're too blind to see that, it is their tragedy, not yours. I took a deep breath, the air finally reaching the bottom of my lungs. She was right. I spent so much time worrying about whether they were right about her that I forgot they were completely wrong about me. I wasn't some fragile, brainwashed girl. I was a woman who had survived 7 years of psychological warfare and come out the other side with her heart intact. Putting on that gown felt like putting on armor. I pinned my cap into place, adjusted the tassel, and looked at myself in the full-length mirror we'd just bought for the hallway. I looked like a stranger to the girl who used to hide in her room and cry because her mother didn't like her outfit. I looked like someone who owned her own life. The ceremony was a blur of black robes and pomp and circumstance. I sat in the sea of graduates, searching the stands. I saw my best friend waving a giant cardboard cutout of my face. I saw my girlfriend standing on her tiptoes, filming everything on her phone with a grin so wide it looked like it hurt. And then I saw my brother. He was tucked away in a corner, wearing a baseball cap pulled low, looking nervous. He had actually come. He had defied the family dinner to be there for me. When my name was finally called, I didn't look for my parents. I didn't scan the crowd for the people who weren't there. I walked across that stage with my head held high, and as I shook the dean's hand, I felt a weight drop off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. I wasn't doing this for them anymore. I was doing it for the girl I used to be, the one who thought she'd never make it out of that house. After the ceremony, we met up on the lawn. My brother came over, looking over his shoulder like he was a double agent. He hugged me tight, smelling like the laundry detergent my mom uses. A smell that normally made me feel safe, but now just made me feel homesick for a home that didn't exist anymore. "I have to go soon," he whispered. "The dinner starts at 6. Mom's already texting the group chat about the special menu." "It's 6, sis. I'm so sorry." "It's okay," I told him, and I actually meant it. "Go. Play the part. But thank you for being here." "I'm proud of you," he said, and then he was gone, disappearing into the crowd to head back to the loyal side of the family. We went out for a huge dinner with my friends and my girlfriend. It was loud, it was messy, and it was filled with people who knew the truth. We toasted to the new job, the new apartment, and the hero who supposedly controlled me. We laughed about the master and pet comment until we were breathless. It was the best night of my life, but there was still a small, dark corner of my heart that was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I found it at 11 p.m. when I checked my phone. My mother had posted a photo on Facebook. It was a picture of the dining table, set with the good china and the silver. My parents were at the head of the table, flanked by my siblings. Everyone was smiling, that tight, forced smile that I knew all too well. The caption read, "Celebrating the strength of family and the bonds that can never be broken. So grateful for the children who choose to stay and the love that is pure and honest." Sometimes you have to let go of the branches that are rotting to save the tree. I was the rotting branch. I sat on my sofa, the glow of the phone screen the only light in the room. I waited for the crushing pain. I waited for the urge to call her and beg for forgiveness. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange, cold clarity. They were never going to change. This wasn't a switch up or a mood. This was who they were. They would rather view their daughter as a rotting branch than admit that she was a flourishing adult who happened to love a woman. They would rather perform a funeral for a living person than admit they were wrong. I looked at my girlfriend, who was fast asleep on the other end of the couch, her head resting on a pillow she'd picked out for our home. She looked so peaceful. She looked like exactly what she was, a person who had stood by me when the world felt like it was ending. I went to my mother's post. My finger hovered over the comment button. I had so many things I wanted to say. I wanted to tell her that I saw through her pure love. I wanted to tell her that I was at my own celebration, surrounded by people who didn't require me to be a puppet. I wanted to tell her that the tree wasn't saving itself. It was dying from the inside out because it refused to let its branches grow. But I didn't. I didn't comment. I didn't like the photo. I didn't even screenshot it to show my friends. I simply hit unfollow. Then I went to my settings and I blocked both of my parents. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, and yet it was as easy as breathing. I realized that as long as I kept a window open into their world, they would keep blowing smoke into mine. They would keep trying to convince me that my happiness was a delusion and that my partner was a villain. The only way to win was to stop watching the show. The next morning, the real world began. I started my big girl job. I walked into that office with my new briefcase and my professional clothes, and for the first time in 7 years, I didn't feel like I was hiding anything. When my coworkers asked about my weekend, I told them I moved into a new place with my girlfriend and graduated. I didn't check the temperature of the room. I didn't wait for a judgmental look. I just said it. And you know what? Nobody cared. They just said, "Congratulations," and "That's so exciting." It turns out, the world isn't nearly as scary as my parents wanted me to believe. But the silence from my family was a heavy thing. Weeks turned into months. I heard through the grapevine, mostly from my brother's occasional hushed phone calls, that my parents had moved from sadness to righteous indignation. They were telling everyone who would listen that I had been stolen from them. They had created a whole mythology where my girlfriend was this master manipulator who had cast a spell on me. It was easier for them to believe I was a victim than to believe I was happy without them. One day, about 4 months after the move, I was at a grocery store near our apartment. I was picking out apples when I saw a woman at the end of the aisle. My heart stopped. It was my mother's sister, my Aunt Sarah. She had always been my favorite aunt, the one who gave me books and taught me how to bake. She saw me, and her face went through a dozen different emotions before settling on a look of deep, profound pity. She walked over to me, her voice a low whisper. "Honey," she said, "I've heard such terrible things. Are you okay? Do you need help? Your mother says you aren't allowed to leave the house without her permission." I stood there, holding a Honeycrisp apple, feeling like I had stepped into a parallel universe. "Aunt Sarah, I'm at the grocery store. Right now. By myself. I'm fine. I'm more than fine." "But she says the girl controls your money? That you don't have access to your own bank account?" I had to lean against the produce bin. The lies had grown legs. They had traveled through the entire family tree. My parents weren't just letting go. They were actively destroying my reputation to ensure that if I ever did try to come back, I would come back as a broken, defeated thing that needed their rescue. "Aunt Sarah," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and sorrow. "I have a job. I pay my own rent. I have my own car insurance. I am living the life I want to live. Mom is lying to you because she can't handle the fact that I'm happy without her. Please, just look at me. Do I look like someone who is being held captive?" My aunt looked at me, really looked at me. She saw the healthy glow of my skin, the confidence in my eyes, the fact that I was standing there, independent and whole. She sighed, a long, weary sound. "She always was a bit of a dramatist," Sarah whispered. "But this is a lot, even for her." That encounter changed everything for me. I realized that my parents' control didn't end when I moved out. They were still trying to control the idea of me. They were trying to own my narrative even after I'd left the house. And it made me realize that I couldn't just be quietly happy. I had to be loud. Standing in that grocery store aisle, clutching an apple while my favorite aunt looked at me like I was a victim of a kidnapping, I realized that my parents' war had entered a new, more dangerous phase. They weren't just content with losing me. They were determined to burn the bridge behind me so thoroughly that no one would ever be able to cross it to find the truth. The lie about the bank account, that was the one that really stung. It was so specific, so calculated to make me look helpless and my girlfriend look predatory. It was a masterpiece of character assassination. I went home that day and sat on our balcony, watching the sunset over the city. I told my girlfriend about the encounter with Aunt Sarah. I expected her to be angry, or maybe even to laugh at how ridiculous it was. But she didn't laugh. She looked out at the horizon, her jaw tight. "They really want people to hate me, don't they?" she asked softly. They want people to fear you, I corrected. Because if they fear you, they'll never listen to me. They'll just think I'm speaking under duress. It was a brilliant, albeit evil, strategy. By framing my independence as coercion, my parents had made themselves the only reliable source of information about my life. If I said I was happy, it was the brainwashing talking. If I said I was successful, it was stolen money. There was no move I could make that they couldn't twist into a symptom of my supposed captivity. But I was done being a character in their tragedy. I decided it was time to start writing my own story. I didn't go on a rant on Facebook. I didn't send a mass email to the family. Instead, I did something much more subtle and, I hoped, much more effective. I started living my life out loud. I started posting photos of our dinners, our weekend trips, and my achievements at work. Not to brag, and not to show them, but to create a public record of the truth. I unblocked my cousins and some of the more reasonable aunts and uncles. I didn't send them messages. I just let them see. I posted a photo of my first solo paycheck, with the sensitive info blurred out, of course, with the caption, "Finally seeing the hard work pay off. So grateful for a career that lets me support myself and the life I've chosen." I posted a photo of my girlfriend and me at a local charity event, both of us smiling, looking healthy and vibrant. No captions about freedom, just the reality of two people in love. I wanted the extended family to see the disconnect. I wanted them to see the woman my mother called a master manipulator and see her instead as the person who was helping me pick out curtains or cheering for me at a 5K run. I wanted them to look at my mother's tragic posts and then look at my joyful life and start asking questions. The response was slow, but it happened. It started with a like from a cousin I hadn't talked to in years. Then, a comment from my uncle asking where we got that great dining table. Slowly, the wall my parents had built around me started to crumble, one brick at a time. But the psychological toll on our relationship was becoming harder to ignore. Even though I had chosen her, the hero comment my father made still lived in the dark corners of our apartment. It's like a virus. You think you've cleared it out, but then a stressor hits and it flares up again. I found myself becoming hypersensitive to any gesture that felt too nice. If she brought me flowers for no reason, I'd find myself wondering, is she doing this to make me feel indebted? If she offered to handle the grocery shopping because I had a big presentation, I'd think, is she trying to control my environment? It was a form of self-sabotage that I couldn't stop. One night, we were supposed to go out to celebrate her new job offer, the one she'd been waiting for all year. I had a headache, a really bad one, and I told her I didn't think I could make it. "Oh, honey, don't worry about it," she said, her voice full of genuine concern. "I'll just stay in with you. We can order some soup and watch a movie. I don't need a big party." In any other world, that's the perfect partner. That's love. But in the world my father built in my head, that was a power move. She was being the hero again. She was sacrificing her night for me so she could hold it over my head later. "No!" I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. "Go out. Go with your friends. I don't want you staying here saving me." She looked like I'd slapped her. "I'm not trying to save you. I'm trying to be with you because you're in pain. Why are you making this a fight?" "Because you always do this," I yelled, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "You always make yourself the martyr. You always have to be the one who does the nice thing, so I'm the one who owes you." As soon as the words left my mouth, I wanted to swallow them back. I saw the light go out in her eyes. She didn't yell back. She just stood there in the doorway, her coat half on, looking at me with a sadness so profound it made my heart ache. "Is that really what you think of me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "After 7 years? You really think I'm keeping a tally?" I felt the tears starting to burn my eyes. "No, I don't. But my dad, he said..." "Your dad isn't here," she finally erupted, her voice cracking. "He's not in this apartment. He's not the one who stayed up with you when you had the flu. He's not the one who knows how you like your coffee. I am. And if you're going to let his voice be louder than mine in our own home, then he's already won. He didn't just lose a daughter. He's trying to make sure I lose a girlfriend too." She walked out the door, and the sound of it clicking shut behind her was the most terrifying thing I'd ever heard. It was different from the way I'd left my parents' house. When I left them, it felt like shedding an old, itchy skin. But this felt like a limb being torn off. I sat on the floor of our living room, the room we had painted together, and I realized how close I was to fulfilling my parents' prophecy. They had said the relationship wouldn't last. They had said she was toxic. And here I was, doing the work for them. I was being the toxic one. I was taking her love and treating it like an insult. I realized that moving out was only the first step. Moving on was going to be much, much harder. I had physically left their house, but I was still mentally living in their basement, looking up through the floorboards, waiting for their approval. I was 26 years old, and I was still letting my father's hero comment dictate how I received love. I waited for her to come back. I didn't text her. I didn't call. I knew she needed space. I spent those hours in total silence, thinking about every controlling thing she'd ever done. I thought about the time she convinced me to go back to therapy when my anxiety was at its peak. Was that control? No, that was saving my life. I thought about the time she pushed me to ask for a raise because she knew I was being underpaid. Was that control? No, that was advocacy. I thought about every surprise date, every changed plan for a sunset walk, every heroic act of kindness. They weren't weapons. They were the bricks of the house she was building for us. A house made of safety, not of fear. When the door finally opened at 1 a.m., I was still sitting on the floor. She looked exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed. She started to walk toward the bedroom without saying a word, but I grabbed her hand. "I'm so sorry," I said, the words tumbling out. "I'm so sorry. You're not a hero. You're just my person. And I'm so scared of losing my family that I'm taking it out on the only person who actually is my family." She didn't move for a long time. Then, she slowly sank down onto the floor next to me. "I can't be the person who has to prove I'm not a villain every single day," she said, her voice weary. "I love you more than anything, but I can't compete with their ghost. You have to decide who you believe." "I believe you," I said, and for the first time, it wasn't just a sentiment, it was a choice. I choose you, every day. From now on, when I hear my dad's voice, I'm going to tell him to shut up. He doesn't get to live here anymore. We sat there for a long time, just holding each other. It wasn't a fix, it was a beginning. I realized that my parents' homophobia and racism weren't just about hating her. They were about making me hate myself for loving her. They wanted me to be ashamed of my own joy. But as we moved into the fall, things started to shift. Her new job was incredible, and she was thriving. I got a promotion. We started making new friends, people who didn't know my parents, people who only saw us as the couple in 4B who always have the best smelling cooking. And then the phone rang. It wasn't my parents. It was my mother's sister, Aunt Sarah. "Honey," she said, her voice sounding different than it had at the grocery store. "I've been watching your posts, and I've been talking to your brother, and I'm coming to the city next weekend. I'd really like to come over for that coffee you mentioned. If your girlfriend is okay with it." My heart leaped. This was it. The first bridge was being built from their side. "We'd love to have you, Aunt Sarah," I said, looking over at my girlfriend who was watering the plants on the balcony. "We'll have the good coffee waiting." But as I hung up the phone, a new fear set in. If Aunt Sarah was coming, my parents would find out. And if they found out their rotting branch was actually a flourishing tree that the rest of the family was starting to visit, I knew they wouldn't just sit back and watch. The escalation was coming. I could feel it in the air, like the cold snap before a winter storm. The day Aunt Sarah arrived, the air in the apartment felt electric. It was the first time anyone from my old life would be stepping into the world I'd built with my girlfriend. I was a nervous wreck. I spent 3 hours cleaning the baseboards, arranging the throw pillows, and making sure the fridge was stocked with everything Aunt Sarah liked. I wanted the apartment to look perfect, not because I was trying to impress her, but because I needed it to be undeniable. I needed the physical reality of our home to shout over the lies my parents had been whispering for months. My girlfriend was being incredibly patient, though I could see the tension in the set of her shoulders. She was wearing a simple, soft sweater, her hair pulled back, looking about as far from a master manipulator as a human being could look. She kept checking on me, offering me water and reminding me to breathe. "She's just your aunt, babe," she said softly, catching my hand as I was about to straighten a picture frame for the 10th time. "She loves you, and if she doesn't like me, that's her loss. But we aren't performing for her. We're just living." "I know," I said, leaning my forehead against hers. I want her to go back and tell them they're wrong. I want her to be the one who tells the truth." When the doorbell rang, my heart did a somersault. I opened the door to find Aunt Sarah standing there with a small bouquet of flowers and a look of profound hesitation. She stepped into the entryway, her eyes darting around as if she expected to see barred windows or a shrine to the dark arts. But as she walked further in, I saw her face change. She saw the sun spilling across the hardwood floors. She smelled the fresh coffee and the muffins my girlfriend had baked. She saw the framed photos of our friends and the stack of books on the coffee table. She saw a home. The first hour was awkward. Sarah sat on the edge of the sofa, clutching her coffee mug like a shield. My girlfriend was a saint. She was polite, warm, and stayed just the right amount of present without hovering. She talked about her new job and asked Sarah about her garden. She didn't try to win her over. She just existed. Slowly, I watched the armor fall off my aunt. By the second hour, she was leaning back in the sofa, laughing at a story about our clumsy dog. She was looking at my girlfriend with genuine curiosity instead of suspicion. During a moment when my girlfriend went into the kitchen to get more water, Aunt Sarah leaned in close to me. Her voice was a low, urgent whisper. She's lovely," Sarah said, looking genuinely bewildered. "She's nothing like what your mother said. Your mother made her sound like a cold, calculating politician. But she's just a girl. She's just a girl who loves you." "I know, Aunt Sarah," I said, feeling a lump form in my throat. "That's what I've been trying to tell everyone. She's the best thing that ever happened to me." Sarah looked down at her coffee, a shadow crossing her face. "Your mother is in a bad way, honey. She's convinced herself that you're in danger. She's been calling the house every night, crying, saying she failed as a mother because she didn't spot the signs earlier. She's turned your father into her own personal bodyguard against the evil influence out here." "The only danger I was in that house," I said firmly. "I was drowning there, and they were the ones holding me under. They just didn't like that someone finally pulled me out." Sarah stayed for 4 hours. When she left, she hugged my girlfriend, a real, genuine hug, and told us she couldn't wait to have us over for dinner at her place. It was a victory, a small, quiet, beautiful victory. I felt like I had finally sent a scout into enemy territory and brought back a convert. But the peace didn't last 48 hours. Monday evening, my phone started exploding. It wasn't my mother, it was my father. He didn't text, he called, over and over, until I finally picked up, thinking it might be a literal medical emergency. "How dare you!" he roared the second I answered. No hello, no how are you, just pure unadulterated rage. "Dad? What are you talking about? How dare you use your Aunt Sarah to spy on us? How dare you bring her into that den of yours and poison her mind? Your mother is hysterical. Sarah called her and told her she was overreacting. And now your mother thinks her own sister has been turned against her? Aunt Sarah came over because she wanted to see me, Dad. She came because she's the only person in this family who actually cares about the truth instead of the fiction you and Mom have created." "The truth?" he scoffed, his voice vibrating with contempt. The truth is that you're a traitor. You're using that woman to divide this family. You're trying to make your mother look like a liar. We were trying to protect you, but you're so far gone you're actually recruiting people to your side of the delusion. I'm not recruiting anyone, I yelled back, my hands shaking. I'm living my life. If the truth makes Mom look like a liar, that's because she is lying. She told people I don't have a bank account. She told people I'm being held against my will. How can you stand by and let her say those things? She says those things because she loves you, he shouted. Because she'd rather believe you're a victim than believe you'd willfully abandon the people who raised you for a woman like that. You've broken her, Nippa. Are you happy? You finally destroyed your mother. The guilt was like a physical weight, a familiar old coat that they were trying to force me back into. For 26 years, I had been responsible for my mother's emotions. If she was sad, it was my fault. If she was angry, I had to fix it. And here he was, using the ultimate weapon, the destruction of my mother. But something was different this time. Maybe it was the 4 months of peace I'd had. Maybe it was the way my girlfriend was currently in the other room, humming to herself as she put away groceries, oblivious to the venom coming through the phone. I didn't destroy her, Dad, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. She's destroying herself. She's choosing her pride and her prejudice over her daughter. And if you're choosing to go down with the ship, that's your choice. But I'm done being the anchor. I hung up. I didn't wait for a response. I blocked his number immediately. I sat on the floor of the hallway, the silence of the apartment feeling like a shield. I realized then that my parents would never have an epiphany. They would never see my girlfriend as the person she was. To them, she would always be the symbol of their loss of control. And to maintain their world, they had to make me the villain. A few days later, my brother called. He was whispering, probably from his car or the backyard. It's bad, sis, he said. They're talking about changing their wills. They're telling everyone that you've officially joined a cult. Mom's been going through your old room and packing up everything, even your old school projects, and putting them in the trash. It's like she's trying to erase that you ever lived there. Let her, I said. It hurt. God, it hurt like a physical wound, but I knew I couldn't stop her. If she needs to pretend I never existed to get through the day, that's on her. But tell her one thing for me, if you can. What? Tell her that the rotting branch she's so worried about is finally starting to bloom, and it's beautiful out here. My brother was quiet for a long time. I'll tell her, but I don't think she'll hear it. And she didn't. The months that followed were characterized by a strange, hollow silence from my parents, punctuated by the occasional update from a family member who had been fed a new lie. But the more they lied, the more the extended family started to pull away from them. Aunt Sarah started hosting alternative family dinners where my girlfriend and I were invited, where my brother would sneak away to join us, and where we were treated like normal human beings. My parents were becoming the rotting branches. By refusing to bend, by refusing to see the truth, they were isolating themselves in a house filled with ghosts and old school projects. They were so busy trying to save me that they didn't realize they were the ones who were lost. It's been almost a year now since I moved out. My girlfriend and I are talking about the future, really talking about it. A wedding maybe, kids definitely. We're building a life that is so full of light that the shadows my parents try to cast can't even reach us anymore. I still have bad days. I still hear my father's voice when my girlfriend does something nice. But it's becoming a faint whisper, easily drowned out by the sound of her laughter. I'm learning that love shouldn't be a debt. It shouldn't be a performance. It shouldn't be something you have to prove you're worthy of. It should just be. I lost my family, or at least the version of them I thought I knew, and it's a grief that I'll probably carry forever. But what I gained was myself. I gained a home where I don't have to check the temperature of the room. I gained a partner who doesn't want to be a hero, just a teammate. And I gained the realization that blood might be thicker than water, but love is the only thing that actually keeps you from drowning. If you're out there right now, and you're sitting on a couch listening to people you love tell you that the person you love is a monster? If you're being told that your happiness is a lie and your independence is a sin, I want you to know one thing. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to be happy. And you are allowed to be the quote-unquote hero of your own story. What would you do in my shoes? Would you have stayed to try and fix a family that didn't want to be fixed? Or would you have walked away to save yourself? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you've ever had to choose between your blood and your soul, please share your story. We're all just trying to find our way home. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of resilience and finding your own path.